Dallas wasn't just a TV show, it was a cultural earthquake. Oil money and lies fueled the Ewing empire, and for over a decade, the world couldn't look away. Who shot JR? That question stopped a nation. But behind the drama of South Fork Ranch, the real stories were even darker. Addiction, divorce, quiet deaths. Fame gave these stars everything and took just as much in return. Today, we revisit the cast of Dallas, not just to remember who they were on screen, but to uncover the pain, strength, and truth behind the legend. Let's begin. Ken Kercheval as Cliff Barnes. Ken Kercheval was born on July 15, 1935 in the small farming town of Wolcottville, Indiana. To millions of Dallas fans, he was Cliff Barnes, the stubborn, impassioned rival to the ruthless J.R. Ewing. When the show premiered in 1978, Ken was 43 years old, a trained stage actor with a long resume, but still waiting for a role that would change everything. Cliff Barnes would become that role. For over a decade, Ken embodied the scrappy underdog, the man always chasing victory, but rarely holding it. While Larry Hagman's J.R. dominated the oil fields with charm and cruelty, Cliff fought with desperation, wounded pride, and unshakable resolve. Ken didn't just play the loser. He gave Cliff layers of vulnerability, rage, and heartbreak that made him unforgettable. And in a world obsessed with power, Cliff was the only one who reminded us what it meant to fall and still keep fighting. Off-screen, Ken's own life wasn't far from the storms of South Fork. Though never as flashy as his co-stars, he carried private battles. In the 1990s, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and had part of his lung removed. He survived, but the experience changed him. He also struggled with alcohol abuse for many years, a quiet war waged far from the public eye. Like Cliff, Ken kept moving forward no matter the cost. His personal life was marked by heartbreak and solitude. He married and divorced 3 times, and while he had several children, his relationships were strained by distance and career demands. Financially, he never enjoyed the kind of security his fame might suggest. He took small roles after Dallas, and while the spotlight faded, he remained grateful for the journey. Ken was known among castmates as kind, self-deprecating, and deeply committed to his craft. He stayed close to the Dallas family through reunions and interviews, always humbled that fans still remembered Cliff, still rooted for him. Ken Kercheval passed away on April 21, 2019 at the age of 83 from complications of pneumonia. At the time of his death, his net worth was modest, estimated at under $1 million, but what he left behind was far greater. Larry Hagman as J.R. Ewing. Larry Hagman was born on September 21, 1931 in Fort Worth, Texas, a place that would mirror both the swagger and steel of the character that would make him immortal. When Dallas began in 1978, Hagman was 47 years old and already known to audiences from I Dream of Jeannie. But nothing, not even decades in show business, could have prepared him for what came next. As J.R. Ewing, the ruthless oil baron with a devilish grin and a drink always in hand, Hagman didn't just play the villain, he redefined him. Audiences loved to hate him, and Hagman reveled in every moment. Whether blackmailing family, cheating business partners, or delivering a smirking one-liner that cut like a knife, J.R. became the face of 1980s television. And behind it all was Larry, brilliant, bold, and dangerously charming. But off-screen, Larry was a man full of contradictions. Born into Hollywood royalty, his mother was Broadway legend, Mary Martin. Larry grew up in shadows that pushed him toward performance and perfection. He served in the U.S. Air Force, studied theater in London, and built his career brick by brick. Yet with fame came demons. Throughout much of his career, Hagman was a heavy drinker, often consuming as much alcohol as the character he portrayed. His drinking was legendary and nearly fatal. In 1995, he was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver and later liver cancer. A life-saving transplant pulled him back from the edge, and he used his second chance to become an advocate for organ donation. Larry's personal life was surprisingly stable for someone so closely associated with scandal. He was married to the same woman, Swedish-born Maj Axelsson, for nearly 60 years, a rare and quiet love story in an industry built on short-term illusions. They had 2 children and lived for many years on a ranch in Ojai, California, where Larry raised longhorn cattle and collected cowboy hats, over 2,000 of them. Though Dallas ended in 1991, Larry never stopped being JR. In 2012, he returned to the role in the series reboot. This time at age 80, still delivering lines with the same wicked brilliance. But just months into filming the 2nd season, Larry was diagnosed with throat cancer. Ever the showman, he continued filming until the very end, his final scenes airing posthumously. Larry Hagman passed away on November 23, 2012, at the age of 81, surrounded by family and friends in a Dallas hospital. His estimated net worth at the time was around $15 million, but his true value couldn't be measured in dollars. He didn't just play a legend, he became one. Barbara Belle Gettis as Miss Ellie Ewing. Barbara Belle Gettis was born on October 31, 1922 in New York City, far from the dust and drama of South Fork Ranch. But when she stepped into the role of Miss Ellie Ewing in 1978 at the age of 55, she became the emotional spine of Dallas. In a world of ruthless men and cutthroat deals, Miss Ellie was the calm center, the matriarch who held the Ewing family and often the show itself together. Barbara didn't play Ellie. She was Ellie, warm, fierce, and grounded in a quiet dignity that made her beloved by millions. Her performance earned her an Emmy in 1980 and cemented her as one of television's most respected leading women. Yet behind her soothing voice and steady gaze was a woman who had lived through deep personal storms long before ever arriving in Texas. Barbara began her career on Broadway, hailed as one of the brightest stars of the 1940s and 1950s. Alfred Hitchcock cast her in Vertigo in 1958, where she gave a hauntingly graceful performance. But Hollywood never quite knew what to do with her understated strength. She wasn't the glamorous type. She was something rarer, real. Off-screen, Barbara knew profound grief. In 1966, her husband, stage director Windsor Lewis, died of cancer. The loss left her heartbroken and raising their daughter alone. Then, in the early 1970s, she herself was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent a mastectomy. She kept the news private, returning to the stage and screen with barely a pause, but the scars, both physical and emotional, never left her. When Dallas came calling, Barbara was nearly ready to retire. But the role of Miss Ellie gave her a new kind of purpose. As the years passed, fans came to see her not just as the mother of the Ewings, but as the soul of the show. Her portrayal was never flashy. It was truthful. And that's what made it unforgettable. In 1984, Barbara stepped away from Dallas temporarily to undergo heart surgery. The role was briefly recast, but fans rejected the change, and producers begged her to return. She did quietly, humbly, and just as powerful as ever. But by 1990, the long days and emotional weight of the series became too much. She retired from acting altogether and disappeared from the spotlight. Barbara spent her final years in Maine living in peaceful solitude by the sea. She painted, wrote children's books, and tended to her garden far from the chaos of Hollywood. She granted few interviews, content to let her work speak for itself. On August 8, 2005, Barbara Belle Gettis passed away from lung cancer at the age of 82. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at around $4 million. But her true wealth lived in the legacy she left behind. She wasn't the loudest character on Dallas, but she was the one that held the show's heart in her hands. Howard Keel as Clayton Farlo. Howard Keel was born on April 13, 1919 in Gillespie, Illinois, the son of a coal miner raised in hardship and destined for grandeur. By the time he joined Dallas in 1981 at the age of 62, stepping into the role of Clayton Farlo, he had already lived 2 lifetimes. One as a golden-voiced MGM musical star of the 1950s, and another as a man rebuilding his life after fame faded. As Clayton, the strong, principled Texas oilman, who would eventually marry Miss Ellie and become a central pillar of the Ewing family. Keel brought a quiet nobility and commanding presence that balanced the chaos of South Fork. He wasn't loud like JR or tortured like Sue Ellen. He was calm, steady, and unshakably dignified. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Off-screen, Howard's life was full of unexpected turns. In the 1950s, he was one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, headlining films like 7 Brides for 7 Brothers and Kiss Me, Kate. With his towering frame and booming baritone, he seemed invincible. But by the 1960s, musical films were fading, and so was his career. Roles dried up. Money vanished. At one point, he was selling cars to support his family. From stardom to obscurity, Howard faced it all with quiet resilience. When he was cast as Clayton Farlo in Season 4, few expected him to become a long-term presence. But his chemistry with Barbara Belle Gettis and his magnetic calm made him a natural fit. He remained with the series until its end in 1991, becoming a fan favorite, especially among older viewers who remembered his movie star days. For Howard, it wasn't just a job. It was redemption. Despite his regal appearance, Howard was warm and deeply humble. Castmates described him as gentle, fatherly, and filled with gratitude. He was married 3 times, but it was his final marriage to Judy Magamal, 25 years his junior, that brought him peace and stability. The couple had 1 daughter together, and Howard often said it was the greatest joy of his later life. In his final years, Howard returned to his first love, music. He began performing in concert again, releasing albums and reconnecting with fans who hadn't heard his voice in decades. Even as health issues emerged, including colon cancer in the early 2000s, he remained active and gracious, always eager to give something back. Howard Keel passed away on November 7, 2004, at the age of 85 from complications of colon cancer. His estimated net worth at the time was between $5 to $10 million, much of it earned during his revival through Dallas and concert tours. But for those who knew him and those who grew up watching him, his greatest legacy was not the money or the fame, but the grace with which he endured reinvention. Don Starr as Jordan Lee. Don Starr was born on September 20, 1917 in Riverside, California, a man whose face you might not recognize instantly, but whose presence helped shape the world of Dallas from its earliest days. When he joined the show in 1978 at the age of 61, Starr stepped into the role of Jordan Lee, a wealthy oilman Ewing family friend and one of the key players in the murky, high-stakes world of Texas petroleum. He wasn't flashy like JR or heroic like Bobby, but Jordan Lee was always there, cigar in hand, making backroom deals and keeping secrets. Don appeared in over 70 episodes of Dallas from 1978 through 1989. As Jordan Lee, he brought a smooth, believable realism to the cutthroat business world the series was built on. He wasn't the villain or the heartthrob, he was something rarer, the insider. The man who knew too much, spoke too little, and always had a seat at the table when big decisions were made. Off-screen, Don Starr's path to television fame was far from typical. Before acting, he worked as an insurance executive and served in the U.S. Army during World War II. Acting was a second act in his life, a passion he pursued in his 40s and 50s after years in corporate life. He took small roles in television and film throughout the 1970s before landing Dallas, the show that would define his legacy. Despite his recurring role on one of America's most watched series, Don never sought the spotlight. He kept his personal life out of the tabloids, rarely gave interviews, and lived a quiet, grounded life far from Hollywood's chaos. He was married to Mary Alice Starr for many years, and they remained devoted to each other until the end. The couple eventually settled in Tucson, Arizona, where Don became a well-known figure in the local theater community, occasionally directing and mentoring young actors. Don Starr passed away on July 11, 1995, at the age of 77, after complications from heart failure. At the time of his death, his net worth was modest, likely under $1 million, but his impact on Dallas was enduring. He helped build the show's world from the inside, giving it the weight and credibility of a real oil empire. George Kennedy as Carter McKay. George Kennedy was born on February 18, 1925 in New York City, a tough city that produced an even tougher man. By the time he joined Dallas in 1988 as Carter McKay, he was 63 years old and already a household name, an Oscar winner, a war veteran, and one of Hollywood's most reliable tough guys. But his role in Dallas marked a powerful new chapter 1 where the villain wasn't slick like JR, but hard-edged, calculating, and unapologetically brutal. As Carter McKay George entered the Dallas universe like a storm, bold, unforgiving, and ready to challenge the Ewings at their own game. First introduced as a Colorado rancher with a hidden agenda, McKay soon took over West Star Oil and became a major power player in the show's final seasons. While JR schemed with a smile, Carter McKay made threats with ice in his voice. And George Kennedy delivered every line with the weight of a man who'd already lived 1,000 lives. Before Hollywood, Kennedy served in World War II, with distinction rising to the rank of captain. He spent 16 years in the military, longer than many actors spend in their entire careers. After his discharge, he battled poverty injury and the uphill struggle of breaking into show business. But in the 1960s, he found his breakthrough first as a burly enforcer in Cool Hand Luke, which won him an Academy Award, and later in disaster epics like Airport and comedies like The Naked Gun. But behind the fame, George lived a life marked by pain and quiet endurance. He was married 4 times twice to the same woman, and adopted several children, including one with severe disabilities. He spoke openly about the emotional toll of raising a family in Hollywood, the heartbreak of losing a child to illness, and the loneliness that haunted him in his later years. Yet he never gave in to bitterness. He kept working, kept showing up, and remained deeply grateful for every role, even when the spotlight began to fade. In his final years, George retreated from the public eye. George Kennedy passed away on February 28, 2016, just 10 days after his 91st birthday. The cause of death was natural causes, though those close to him said he had never truly recovered from the loss of his beloved wife Joan in 2015. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $5 million, earned not through scandals or fame chasing, but through steady, honest work. George Petri as Harve Smithfield. George Petri was born on November 16, 1912, in New Haven, Connecticut, a classically trained actor with the kind of face that quietly commanded trust. When he joined Dallas in 1979 at the age of 66, he brought to life Harve Smithfield, the Ewing family's no-nonsense, ever-loyal attorney. He wasn't flashy, wasn't fiery, but when Harve spoke, people listened. And for over a decade, George Petri became the steady legal hand behind South Fork's biggest crises. As Harve Petri appeared in over 50 episodes from 1979 through 1991, making him one of the show's most recognizable supporting players. He handled divorces, estate battles, corporate takeovers, and cover-ups, all with calm professionalism. In a world of lies, revenge, and backroom deals, Harve was the one man who always seemed to follow the rules, and that was no accident. George Petri had built his entire career on being the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to leave an impression. Before Dallas, Petri had already carved out a long and steady career in television. He began in radio in the 1940s, transitioning into television at a time when the medium was still in its infancy. From Perry Mason to The Honeymooners, and later guest appearances on The Jefferson, Seinfeld, and Murphy Brown, he was always working. Never in the tabloid spotlight, but always present, always sharp, always. Off-screen, George was the embodiment of professionalism. Castmates recalled his quiet demeanor, meticulous preparation, and kind spirit. He was married for many years and lived a low-profile life, rarely giving interviews or chasing fame. He preferred to work, to deliver clean, solid performances, and then step away without fuss. In many ways, Harve Smithfield wasn't just a role, it was an extension of the man himself, measured, trustworthy, and never drawn to drama. Though Petri's role on Dallas was recurring and not always front and center, he left an undeniable mark. In the most chaotic moments, deaths, lawsuits, betrayals, Harve was there with a folder in hand and reason in his voice. And in a series defined by chaos, that kind of presence was rare. George Petri passed away on November 16, 1997, his 85th birthday from lymphoma. His death, like much of his life, came quietly and without fanfare. There were no headlines, no network specials. But for those who knew Dallas, who remembered that familiar voice delivering legal advice to the most powerful family in Texas, his absence was deeply felt. Patrick Duffy as Bobby Ewing. Patrick Duffy was born on March 17, 1949 in Townsend, Montana, a quiet small-town boy who would go on to become one of television's most beloved leading men. When Dallas premiered in 1978, Duffy was just 29 years old, stepping into the role of Bobby Ewing, the youngest son of the Ewing dynasty and the moral compass in a world ruled by power and deception. From the beginning, Bobby was everything. JR wasn't, honest, compassionate, loyal. And Patrick played him with a sincerity that made audiences fall in love. He wasn't just the good guy, he was the soul of the series. His chemistry with Victoria Principal's Pamela Barnes created one of TV's most iconic love stories, while his brotherly battles with Larry Hagman's JR gave Dallas its heartbeat. In 1986, while still at the height of his fame, Patrick received news that shattered his world. Both of his parents had been murdered during an armed robbery at the tavern they owned in Montana. The grief was devastating, and yet Patrick returned to work with the same grace and professionalism he always showed. He later said his Buddhist faith helped him find peace in the face of unimaginable pain. Duffy left Dallas briefly in 1985, leading to the now infamous shower scene twist where Bobby was revealed to be alive, and an entire season was written off as a dream. It was one of the most controversial moments in TV history, but fans didn't care. They just wanted Bobby back. And Patrick delivered, staying with the show until its original end in 1991. Off-screen, Patrick's personal life mirrored his TV persona, grounded, faithful, and deeply devoted to his family. He was married to ballet dancer Carlin Rosser for over 40 years until her death in 2017. Their love story was quiet but deep, and her loss left a hole he openly spoke about. They had 2 sons, and family remained his guiding star even after fame faded. In the 2010s, Patrick returned for the Dallas reboot, reprising his role as an older, wiser Bobby. Though the new series was short-lived, fans were thrilled to see him again. Still strong, still principled, still the beating heart of South Fork. As of 2025, Patrick Duffy is 76 years old. He now lives a peaceful life, often reflecting on his journey from Montana boy to international TV icon. His estimated net worth is around $30 million, earned not just through acting, but through decades of careful living and heartfelt work. Linda Gray as Sue Ellen Ewing. Linda Gray was born on September 12, 1940, in Santa Monica, California, a beauty with brains, charm, and a steel spine hiding just beneath the surface. When she joined Dallas in 1978 at the age of 37, few could have predicted that her character, Sue Ellen Ewing, would become one of the most iconic, tragic, and unforgettable women in television history. At first, Sue Ellen was written as the perfect political wife, elegant, obedient, and emotionally restrained. But Linda Gray turned her into something far more powerful, a woman slowly unraveling under the weight of a toxic marriage to J.R. Ewing. Week after week, she delivered scenes of raw emotion, pain, and desperation, often through just a glance or a trembling whisper. Her portrayal of Sue Ellen's descent into alcoholism, heartbreak, and ultimate self-empowerment was nothing short of revolutionary. Behind the scenes, Gray's own life was far from glamorous. She had married young and spent much of her early adulthood in the shadow of domestic expectations, raising 2 children while trying to keep her own dreams alive. When she finally got her break on Dallas, it was after years of working as a model commercial actress and even as a body double famously for Anne Bancroft's legs in The Graduate. Off-screen, Linda endured her own struggles. She went through a painful divorce, battled self-doubt, and often felt unseen in an industry obsessed with youth and conformity. But like Sue Ellen, she emerged stronger. In interviews, she spoke candidly about rejection, aging in Hollywood, and the internal work it took to heal emotionally, spiritually, and creatively. Linda remained with Dallas until the original series ended in 1991 and reprised her role in later reunion movies and the 2012 reboot. Fans who had grown up with her cheered as Sue Ellen returned, this time more poised, more powerful, and still haunted by the past. Gray's performance continued to evolve just as she had. Outside of acting, Linda became a passionate advocate for women's health, a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, and a sought-after speaker on resilience and reinvention. Her 2015 memoir, The Road to Happiness is Always Under Construction, revealed a thoughtful, complex woman who had learned sometimes painfully how to build a life on her own terms. As of 2025, Linda Gray is 84 years old and still active, not just professionally, but personally. She lives in Los Angeles, in a home filled with light art and photographs of her Dallas family. Her estimated net worth is around $10 million, earned through a lifetime of careful work and relentless determination. Victoria Principal, as Pamela Barnes Ewing. Victoria Principal was born on January 3, 1950 in Fukuoka, Japan, the daughter of a U.S. Air Force sergeant and a world traveler before she was even old enough to walk. When she joined Dallas in 1978 at the age of 28, she stepped into one of television's most complicated roles. Pamela Barnes Ewing. The woman caught between two warring families and the emotional heart of a series built on power, revenge, and loyalty. As the Barnes daughter who married into the Ewing dynasty, Pam was love and light in a world of manipulation. Her relationship with Bobby Ewing, played by Patrick Duffy, became the beating heart of the series, a Romeo and Juliet romance in cowboy boots. Victoria brought a softness to Pam, but also quiet strength. She wasn't just the pretty wife she was, the moral bridge between feuding empires, always torn, always trying to heal what others wanted to destroy. Off-screen, Victoria's life was no less dramatic. She was in a severe car crash at age 19 that nearly ended both her beauty and her acting dreams. The recovery was long, painful, and deeply transformative. It changed how she viewed fame and pushed her toward holistic health, a passion that would later define her post-acting life. On Dallas, Victoria became a fan favorite not just for her beauty, but for the vulnerability she brought to every scene. But behind the camera, she often felt creatively stifled. She clashed with producers over storylines, especially when Pam was written into corners. She felt betrayed her character's integrity. After 9 seasons, she made the bold decision to leave Dallas in 1987. It was a shock to fans. Pam's sudden car crash and mysterious disappearance left a hole that the show never quite filled. After leaving Dallas, Victoria didn't chase another big role. Instead, she reinvented herself. She launched Principal Secret, a skincare empire rooted in her passion for wellness, which became one of the most successful celebrity-founded brands of its time. Quietly and on her own terms, she built a fortune not through Hollywood, but through vision and discipline. Her company, combined with investments and authorship of several best-selling health books, pushed her estimated net worth to over $200 million by the 2010s. Romantically, her life was complicated. She was married twice, including a highly publicized union with rock star Harry Glassman, which ended in divorce. She never had children, and in interviews, she spoke candidly about the loneliness that sometimes accompanied her independence. Still, she remained fiercely private, retreating from Hollywood completely by the early 2000s to focus on animal rescue, environmental activism, and her own inner peace. As of 2025, Victoria Principal is 75 years old, living a quiet, self-sustained life on a ranch in Southern California. She rarely makes public appearances and has turned down every offer to return to Dallas, not out of bitterness, but because, as she once said, Pam had her ending, and so did I. Dallas wasn't just a show. It was a mirror of ambition, heartbreak, and survival. And now, decades later, the stories behind the camera are even more haunting than the ones we watched unfold on screen. If these lives moved you, don't let them be forgotten. Like, share, and subscribe, and keep the legacy of Dallas burning one story at a time.